My guest today is Anthony Peressini. Anthony is an engineer and elite Hyrox coach. He currently coaches more elite Hyrox athletes than anyone else, including 4 of the top 15 women and 2 of the top 15 men. One of the athletes he coaches is James Kelly. James is a major contender for the Hyrox World Championships this year, having won 2 majors this year. Anthony and James co-host the Hybrid Training podcast, which is phenomenal. If you're into Hyrox or if you're into hybrid training, then you'll enjoy this conversation. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks, John.
So when a lot of people think about Hyrox, they think of the strength components. They see the sleds, they see the wall balls, they see the lunges. They think somebody coming from a CrossFit background or somebody from a strength background, they're the ones who are going to excel at the sport. I'm curious, Anthony, your experience, is this more of an endurance event or more of a strength event? What kind of background tends to do better going into a Hyrox?
So you get people from all sorts of backgrounds, right? Coming into Hyrox, you have your triathletes, you have your CrossFitters, you have your runners, you have people that have played sport, like skill sports their whole lives, like football or soccer or baseball, anything. They come in here and they try to perform, right? And really, depending on what their background is, depends on where they're going to be coming from in terms of what's going to be more difficult for them. I think actually the CrossFitters have an easier time if you talk about finishing their first race, right? They're not going to get slowed down by the sleds. They're not going to get slowed down by any of the stations. Really, it's going to be the impact and the amount of running, but they can always walk, right? They could always go. So in terms of finishing, it might be a little bit easier coming from a CrossFit background. Of course, and that's just, it might be silly to say, but like somebody who works out a lot does well in a fitness event, like A equals B, right? So, and then you have your triathletes and runners who will actually, with a little bit of time invested, depending on what their strength background and their cross training background is prior to that, could actually do really well with as more time in the sport, because once they're able to accumulate that much strength that they need and the ability to push and pull and still maintain their higher level of running, usually will succeed a little bit better.
Anthony, give us a sense for the current world record pace for a Hyrox, and how much room do you think there is to keep on improving on that time?
Okay, so I've tried to do it a couple times, like what do I think the fastest ever person could run, right? And every year you look at it and you're like, oh, well, they almost achieved this year, so it's got to be faster than what you originally guessed, right? A few years ago, like if you would have told me in 2020 or 2021 that the women would break 60, I'd have been like, yeah, that's probably pretty far off, that's 5-6 years off. But now we have 4 women that have broken 60. They're approaching 55. It's getting better and better. And kind of the way you look at it is, I know the women's a little bit better, but just for an example, my wife, when Lauren broke the world record, I think her average run pace over the 8.7 kilometers was under 5:45 per mile pace, the entire average running, and then her station time. So you got to look at the guys back in 2021, 2022, that would have been astounding for them. And now you have 2 guys, Hunter and JK, who have hit that 53:22 mark. So it's just getting better and better. And I really think the men might be a little further off from breaking 50 than the women are from breaking 55. But I think we're just going to keep seeing them get better. And really what happens is each athlete goes into the race a little differently, but once they can maximize the stations for themselves, it's just about the runs. Like how fast can they get while maintaining what they're able to achieve on the stations.
Yeah. No, it's been so interesting to watch the times just keep on getting better and better each year. It seems like we're still working out the exact best way to train for Hyrox, and it's just, super cool to see those times coming down.
And it really depends. I don't think there ever will be one certain way, right? Like everybody responds differently. So find what works for you and do it. And then if you try it over and over, once you start to plateau, try another way and see hey, maybe now this will work for me a little better.
So you mentioned James Kelly and his amazing race just a couple of weeks ago where I think he was just a couple seconds off of world record.
0.7 of a second.
0.7 of a second. There we go. There we go. So you started working with James just over a year ago, I believe. So how much quicker do you think James has gotten since working with you? And what do you think has been the reason for those improvements?
So
guys, just one sec. If you are enjoying this video, do make sure to hit subscribe. It is the best way to support the channel. We're going to have tons of more Hyrox content up, so I'd love if you joined for this journey. Now let's get back to Anthony. He's going to explain how he thinks JK has gotten better.
JK's, we started working together just after the Vienna major in 2024. And just before, like 2 weeks before the Washington, D.C. major in 2024, and leading up to his Cologne race. And kind of knew when I got him, one of the things I do is I'm like, so what have you been doing? Like, because we just have to take a look at, you know, what you have been doing and compare that to the direction we want to push him in. And JK, I mean, I would never take full credit for what he's done. I think that whether it was me or somebody else, he was going to break in. It was understanding, and I think him and I get along and mesh really well, and that's what like really helps, is because he makes me want to help him, and so we work really well together. Like we text each other all the time. It's kind of weird. Not weird, but like we'll wake up and he'll send me a good morning text, or like right now he's in Nashville, so he'll wake up way before me, and I just think it's funny that, like, you know, it just evolves into like a real friendship, and we get to talk and like exchange like coaching ideas and stuff. But really, what I think has helped JK is just having, I think the training has definitely changed for him, making him more confident in what we do. I mean, like we said, there's a lot of different ways to change. There's a lot of different ways to train, but you got to find what works for you. And when you plateau, you change it up a little. And I think what he started doing was working for him. And then he did plateau a little, and he wanted to get a little bit like better. So he switched it up, and he found that this works for him as well. And so I think it's just, he's professionalized his life a lot as too. For him, it might just be somebody having belief in him and walking him through it. Not that he didn't know he could do it himself, but like somebody, just that like outside voice telling you, here's what you can do, and here's how you can do it, and here's why. Like we'll go back to his training. We don't really test like sims, or we don't test things a lot, but we'll go back to his training and I'll look at it and I'll be like, look, you did this in this workout, so you can do this. And we know like, this is how fast you can do these things, so why can't you do this in the race? And then he starts to see it and believe in it. And it's just I think it might just be an outside perspective of somebody taking his hand and helping him. And because he's a great coach himself, right? So he knows these things. It just helps to have somebody talk him.
Yeah, I think that just goes to show the benefit of the athlete-coach relationship. And I think that's something that's very special about the podcast that you guys do together, the hybrid coaching podcast. That relationship, you know, really shines through, and it's like amazing to watch that dynamic. So that's really cool to hear, Anthony. So I'm curious. So you mentioned some plateaus that JK has hit in the past. Has he hit any of those plateaus during the course of working with you? Have you guys had to significantly alter training, or is that something more prior to working with you?
So it's never like significant, but like we'll be going through and we'll notice things have like you know when somebody's improving, like they feel it like week to week. Like right now, you know, we're just over 4 weeks away from World Championships, and I'm getting daily text messages from him like, oh my God, this feels so good. This feels so good. Like I'm on, like he's prepping right now, and you can tell he's in like an upward trajectory going into the World Champs, which is exactly what you want. When you look at like the past, you know, he had this same feeling a little bit before Hong Kong, where he was like on an upward trajectory and he felt like nothing could break him, right? And we go through Hong Kong, and then it was like he definitely had like hit some sort of ceiling there. And it took a month to like some backing off and some like adjustments to things to figure it out. And then he goes into Las Vegas with a little bit different strategy, and it just wasn't there at that time. But once we like kind of broke through that and broke through the not stagnation, but the what he went through Las Vegas, then he goes to Glasgow and like just boom, it hits again, you know? And then after Glasgow, it was like, all right, well, we have this lesson we learned. Let's just take the time now to rebuild a few things. And then now he's on this upward trajectory again where it's like, dude, you're going right into world championships, like full bore, head of steam, and nobody can predict what's going to happen, but he's going to be extremely difficult to beat.
I think so too. His numbers have looked phenomenal this year, and it seems like he keeps on getting better as well. Okay, so you mentioned a couple short periods where he's had to back off a little bit of the intensity. One thing I've noticed about your training methodology, Anthony, you've talked about building general capacity year round and continuing to level up without significant periodization. Is that an accurate framing? And how do you think about building fitness year round?
So it's not just we don't just like the periodization isn't the same as like a specific weightlifting build, right? It's not the exact same as a specific strength build, but we're always like it's slower progress because we have to mix things. And well, when you run and you put this catabolic effect on your body of running and aerobic fitness, it's your strength can still progress, maybe just a little bit slower, right? And you put yourself in an anabolic state versus catabolic state at different training times throughout the week. Somebody who's just doing like powerlifting, they don't want to go into that catabolic state. They need the hypertrophy. They need everything to grow, get big, right? Because your total strength is like a function of how many muscle fibers you can get to fire, how many what the cross-sectional area of your muscle is. Like there's so many things that go into like what your total strength is, and the easiest way to get stronger is to just get a bigger muscle. But if we just get a bigger muscle, that's adding stress to our running that we're trying to improve. That's adding stress to the other aerobic pieces we're trying to improve. Plus, if you just build a bigger muscle, you don't immediately just have like these capillaries that go to it to feed it blood, and you only have so much blood, right? So you can't just like continually get stronger through hypertrophy. You want to get stronger through more recruitment of muscle fibers and more neuromuscular coordination. So if we can emphasize and improve those things, it's a little bit slower to get stronger, but we get to build these like endurance pieces as well at the same time.
Interesting. So most of the time you are looking to build strength and endurance concurrently. You don't tend to go through cycles with one or the other. Okay.
Well, so we'll do emphasis. So every time we have like a macro cycle, we have an emphasis. We have a primary goal, a secondary goal, and a tertiary goal. And usually the primary goal is like, hey, you have a long time till your next race. Let's build some strength, but we don't want to be building it all the way through our race, right? We want to like get to our build and then still have time to build the power and the coordination of it after that.
Interesting. Okay. And so one thing that you've talked about a lot is threshold training. And I think JK is a huge fan of threshold training as well. Can you explain a little bit about threshold training and why do you think it's so beneficial for Hyrox in particular?
So I was introduced to threshold training several years ago. I used to do like marathons and triathlons and stuff. After I finished wrestling, I went to do that stuff. And I think my first introduction, there was like an article in a Runner's World magazine that my mom had at a house in Montana on the coffee table. She had a Runner's World magazine. I was sitting on the couch. I'd opened it up and I read a little bit about threshold training. And I think it was Marius Bakken he'd written something and I was just reading it. And I read about like what it meant. Didn't think much of it, went through, there was more time that passed. And then I had a wrestling coach. Oh wait, maybe the wrestling coach was first. Wrestling coach had said something about it. My coach, Troy Steiner, had said like, yeah, you want to be working right at this like peak level where you're recovering just as fast as you're working. And like something about that. And I was like, well, that's really smart. Like to me, I'm like very logically focused. So if something makes sense, I'll be like, well, yeah, that's what you do. And that was how it was explained to me. And then like later on, we get to like actual threshold, and we started hearing all about, you know, Jacob Ingebrigtsen and the Norwegian method, and like how running had adopted it. And then there was always like functional threshold power in biking. So you start to think about these different levels and how you can use them. So what threshold is there's lactate that builds up in your blood. Well, it builds up right in your muscles and they expel it, but that lactate can be recycled in the Krebs cycle, and it can actually be used as fuel. And it's not necessarily the cause of fatigue, but it's an indicator of fatigue. It's like the hydrogen ions are the ones that actually would be causing the acidification. But the lactate you can build up and you can measure it. It's much easier to measure that than it is to measure your like pH level, I guess. What happens is you get this blood lactate level, and in the analysis of it, at different levels, depending on the intensity you're running at, lactate builds up, right? And it can stay steady because it gets recycled and it like gets stored in the blood, so it'll stay steady, or like slowly increase, right? But there comes a point where your body can't recycle it as fast as it's producing it. And if you plot this on a graph, you get this like little jump, usually at where what's called like your ventilatory threshold 1, which it's a whole bunch of names, but that'd be lactate threshold 1, ventilatory threshold 1, your aerobic threshold. All those are kind of synonymous terms, and they kind of mean like your marathon pace, right? Like 3-hour pace. You see a little bump in the lactate there all of a sudden, and then it levels out a little bit. But then when you get to a certain point, and this can be around like 4.0 millimoles per liter, but at a certain point, it turns up sharply. That means that that means you're working harder than your body can recycle that fatigue. So if you reach that point, it's like having to like really come back down before you can continue going, because you can't stay past that for a very long time.
Right.
Because it'll just build up. And that point, that inflection point where it starts to go up, is your anaerobic threshold, your lactate threshold 2, your ventilatory threshold 2. Like there's a lot of terms there, but it's basically your 1-hour pace. And for everybody it can be a little bit different. Like you can pull it back a little bit and maybe it's your 50-minute pace or like your 15-kilometer run pace, like something like that, where somewhere in there it's really close, right? And you can usually go like 3 to 5% on either side of it and still be okay. Or, well, 3% past it and be okay, but you can't stay there for too long when you get by there. And with Hyrox, it's about a 1-hour race. And so it's like, oh, well, that kind of lines up perfectly. What if we could run and do stations right at that inflection point? Then, if that's what we're training, is that point, just making it like faster and faster so I can run my velocity at my lactate threshold 2 faster over time before it starts to turn up, then I'm just going to go faster in this race, right? Kind of like, and it's really hard to gauge in terms of your stations. You know, the rowing and the skier actually might be some of the easier ones to do it, but not a lot of people can modulate how fast they do wall balls. Lots of people will do same thing with the farmer carry, because you have that like that distance in the farmer carry where there's a certain point where is it better to go faster and be a little bit more fatigued, or is it better to go slower and have to hang on to them longer, and then you're fatiguing your forearms, the smaller groups, right? So you got to find where your zone is at for that. And then the like the lunges, you could always just like kind of stop, but then you're not making forward progress. So maybe you can lunge a little bit faster or slower. And the sleds are, you know, can you reach a certain point? You're kind of going to go anaerobic at some point. Like you're going to cross that line. So can you cross that line and come back? Can you train to cross that line and come back? And so just what we found with threshold training is like just the better we get at clearing lactate, recycling the lactate, like, you know, it takes less time to recover and we can get back to that speed we want to be at.
And how often is this something that you're testing, Anthony? So are you measuring lactate in the blood on a regular basis?
If it was me with a gym and a lab full of people that I could just have the athletes always train at, I would do it every single day that we did lactate threshold training. That's not realistic. First off, like just the little handheld device that we do use is, you know, it can be like $400, and then every single test strip you use is $2. So if you're doing like thresholds, the way we do them, double thresholds are running in the morning and the machines at night. If I'm testing you on both of them, I could be going, depending on how many sets you're doing, through like 15 sets of strips every day, depending on how many athletes. And unless you're really sponsored by someone to do that, you're not going to do that. And like the professional athletes, if you talk about like Ingebrigtsen and stuff, they'll test their blood frequently. We usually will do a blood lactate test ideally every 3 to 4 months. Sometimes, a lot of the time, it just goes to every 6 months, just because like that's when the races fall and that's when we have time to do it. And we'll use that range that we get for your aerobic and your anaerobic thresholds and just have you run until the next time we test within those ranges.
And are you doing lactate testing on the stations as well?
I'd like to, but it's really hard to just be able to do that. I mean, because the sled surface changes, the feeling and the weights of the sled, so it'd be hard to do that. And just the conditions aren't the same. We try to make wherever we're running at, the conditions the same as they're going to be training in. And then the same thing if we do it on like the machine. So if you do a row or a ski threshold or even a bike threshold, you would want it to be the same conditions that you would be training in, so that since we're not testing every time.
Let's talk about intensity then. So it seems like this threshold intensity has been very beneficial for increasing performance. So in terms of a training setting, how often are you going above threshold intensity? How often are you roughly at threshold? And how often are you training much easier? And maybe do you break that down in terms of running and stations, or do you think of them as the same thing? How do you think about that?
And this is what I tell everybody that's on the pro track, the daily dose, all of our training things, anybody I coach, everything's easy unless I tell you otherwise.
Okay.
Everything is easy pace, going at it. Easy pace means like sometimes during the general physical preparedness, the GPP, which if you were just to look at it, you might think it looks like a CrossFit WOD. I say it's not HIIT. We're not going out there to do HIIT. These GPPs are like usually station work within zone 2, zone 3. You're getting practice on the implements. You're getting practice on the actual movements. You're getting general fitness. So like we'll do other things. We do a lot of dumbbell snatches. We do a lot of like empty barbell thrusters and obviously a lot of burpees and push-ups and pull-ups. Like we do things that aren't in a Hyrox race, but things that are good for your general fitness. We'll do barbell snatches, we'll do push presses, kettlebell swings, a lot of kettlebell swings, and goblet squats. So like there's a lot of different movements we do, but everything I tell them, it's easy unless stated otherwise. And so under that framework, we have 2 days a week that are double threshold, which means that in the morning they run at their threshold pace for any amount of intervals. And the intervals will range from 2 minutes to 15 minutes, but it's usually 2 minutes to 10 minutes. But sometimes we'll throw in a 12 or 15. And they'll do that depending on the time of year. That first one will be anywhere from like 27 to 35 minutes of work for those length of intervals. And then you always run that at like your aerobic threshold, right? So you stay within that zone. And then that's obviously getting you to like on a 5-zone heart rate model, that'd be like zone 4. And then your afternoon threshold or your second threshold of the day is actually on the machine. So you pick a ski or a row, and then you do that one at your anaerobic threshold. It's usually about half the time as the first one in terms of what we do. So if the first one was like 30 minutes of work, the second one would be about 18 minutes of work, 15 to 18 minutes of work. And you do the machine threshold at not maybe like low zone 5 on a 5-zone model, but it would be your anaerobic threshold for that machine, which generally right now I just tell them to get there on the machine. It's a little bit harder than to get there while running. So it's like your 10K pace is closer.
Okay.
And those are 2 of the days per week. And then there's our X day, which is the strength runs and sometimes maybe like an X workout or something that can be done at a little bit faster of a pace. But that strength running is really like the only time during the week where it's a sustained zone 5. Like those are hill runs or fartleks or just other various runs where you would actually speed up.
Love it. Love it. And give us a sense for the total volume. So, how many hours are the elite Hyrox athletes training each week? And how is that broken down between time in the gym and time running?
Let's see. I mean, I do the timing, like I estimate how much time I put out on like the pro track, which Vivian and Bo do the pro track. And that's about 15 hours of movement per week.
Mm.
And that's actual movement. So I'm not talking, so like if I have you do a 12-minute warm up, a 7 by 4 minute threshold with 48 seconds rest between each one, and then a 12-minute cool down, that would only count as 12 plus 28 plus 12, right? So it'd be like, what is that, 50 minutes of movement? Not quite 58. Well, it'd be something like that. So it wouldn't be, it'd be 52 minutes of movement. It wouldn't be the entire time it takes you to do everything with the rest included, right? It would just be how much you're moving. So it's not total time spent in your gym. So 15 hours of movement throughout the week is generally what the like pro track is. But like I say, it's still for everyone. You reduce the volume of each piece to your level where you're at, right? And one of the things I try to maintain is running, or equilibrium. The running is about 50% of that. So if you have 15 hours of work, about 50% is running, 50% is gym work. That's generally how it's maintained. Different athletes that like maybe the gym work goes a little bit more, or certain athletes, the running will go a little bit more. When I'm like with JK or Kate or Maria or Zara, like we'll play with how much time they're actually spent doing which piece, because it depends on what matters more to them and where they need to improve to stay at the elite level.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay, so you mentioned 12 to 15 hours. It's interesting to compare that to a sport like triathlon. I feel like we hear of professional triathletes quite often hitting 20 plus hours in a training week.
Yeah, that's what I program. I think Vivian said it on a podcast previously too, that she's like, so what else can I do? And she had talked to my wife Lauren, and they were like, well, you can just add as much bike work as you want throughout the week whenever you want to it. So that doesn't include some of the just sitting and pedaling that might be zone 1 stuff. Because that can get added in. Some people do that, some don't. Some of the more elite athletes, I'd probably say JK is more than 15 hours a week. He's probably up there in the 20s plus. Some of the elite athletes are a little bit higher than that. But in terms of like the pro track that I write out, that's general, that is, about, depending on the time of year, 14 to 16 hours per week.
Amazing. Okay, and let's just make this a little bit more concrete. So you mentioned Bo Wills as one of the athletes you train. And on one of your podcast episodes, you mentioned a training day of his that included 19 kilometers of running, 40 minutes of which were at threshold. There were 100 wall balls, 40 sumo deadlifts at 100 kgs, 80 toes to bar, 50 plyo push-ups, 20 minutes on the Echo bike, 125 meters of sled push, 100 box jumps, 4 minutes weighted planks, 4 minutes of wall balls, 120 Russian twists. And that was only the stuff that you programmed. He might have been doing extra cycling on the side. Who knows? How does somebody like Bo fit this into a day? How are you able to fit in that much volume?
So I remember that day because I laughed about it when I saw that he'd written it all out. It's written out more like so that includes his warm up and cool down kilometers from his threshold, right? So he did what did you say, 19 kilometers?
19 kilometers of running, 40 minutes of which were at threshold.
So it's like 12 miles of running. Is that right?
Yeah, about that.
So that sounds like a big day. He'll put it in. I don't know if I could pull that day up, but there's a lot of those things on there as like the strength set. So the strength set, maybe he did it within 10 minutes, and maybe like Right now, I like to do a lot of alternating EMOMs. So, like minute one, you're doing maybe 8 reps of sumo deadlifts. And minute two, you're doing like jumping lunges. And you'll rotate back and forth for 10 minutes. So, you get 40 sumo deadlifts in there and, 50 jumping lunges, or it's probably 20. So, 100 jumping lunges. So, you could get a lot of volume without being super taxing because they're able to move through the movements and because it's easy work, like zone 1, zone 2 stuff.
Love it, love it. So it seems like really controlling the intensity is very important in terms
Yeah.
of Hyrox training.
Yeah. So a lot of the times you got to think like intensity equals injury. Sometimes like you don't get hurt most of the time. Primarily, you don't get hurt like doing a light jog. You get hurt sprinting, You don't get hurt when you're lifting. Usually when it's light, you get hurt when you overtax a system and then load it up, or if you go super heavy. So it's usually the name of the game is consistency and longevity. So the longer you can stave off injury and just like build and build and build, it's just progressive. It's like compounding interest.
So good, so good. I feel like there's a lot of wisdom in that. Okay, Anthony, let's play a game of overrated and underrated.
No.
I'm going to give you a training topic, and you're going to tell me whether you believe it's overrated or underrated for improving Hyrox performance. So we've covered a couple of these already. Let's start with zone 2 training.
I think it's perfect. Well, I think you should be doing it. Does that mean it's overrated or underrated? Because I think a lot of people know you should be doing it. I think it's appropriately rated.
Fairly rated. Okay. And what do you like about zone 2 training?
You can just do it, a lot of it. And that now zone 2, you got to think as well is like, I like to just call it easy, because for an everyday athlete, for anybody just trying to start, or for the majority of athletes, getting to zone 2 is relatively easy. You start to go out for a jog, you're in zone 2, right? You're in that, right? A lot of the elite athletes, they do so much that like they have a very low resting heart rate. It's actually an effort to get into that zone 2. So it's better, like, you don't want them to be working to get into zone 2, because then that's adding intensity, that's adding stress to the body. So you can actually pull it back, and like zone 1's okay too.
100%. Okay, next one, powerlifting. So that would be your squat, your bench, your deadlift. Is this overrated or underrated for Hyrox?
So what's the angle we're coming at? Because like we do a squat, bench, and deadlift, we each one of them twice a week, like throughout the program that I put out. I don't know exactly what everybody else is doing. So I think people know you need to have this raw strength. So if everybody's doing it, then it would be appropriately rated. If that's all you're doing, it's definitely overrated.
How often do you see athletes getting too strong for Hyrox?
It depends on their background. They want to be stronger is a common misconception I see. They're like, I just want to be stronger. This person is way stronger than me. And it's like, yeah, but you're faster than them. So like play to your strengths.
Play to your strengths. Yeah. Okay. Cycling. We've seen quite a few Hyrox elite athletes do a lot of cycling. Is this overrated or underrated for Hyrox training?
Underrated. Do it more.
And why is that? Why is cycling a good modality?
It's just that movement, that base, like you're just continuing to be able to go, and it builds power too, like single leg power. If you're continuing, again, that's like, which background are you coming from?
Yeah, it depends if you're more the endurance side or the strength side, right? Yeah,
I get it. Yeah, I get a lot of people that are coming from CrossFit, right? And so I want to make sure that like when I talk to them, CrossFit obviously has for a long time gone skewed way towards the strength side. Over the years, the progressive strength, like you go back and look at some of the original CrossFit games, and it was like 135 was a heavy push press. That's not anymore. 185 isn't even anymore. So again, whatever background they're coming from, I'd say it can only help right now.
Okay. All right. And let's do one more. How about Vo2 Max Intervals?
Just from the side I'm coming on, that's overrated.
Overrated. And why's that?
Yeah, it depends on the length of your interval. I'm not saying we don't do any Vo2 Max, but because we do strides, like after easy runs, we'll do 20-second strides. And when you're already fatigued from your easy run, you can do some hard ones, but specifically paying attention to VO2 max intervals that are multiple minutes long, higher end. It's just maybe a little bit too much emphasis has been placed on VO2. You know, now if you're talking about like the velocity at the VO2 max, it's good to improve it, but there's two ways to improve the zone we're actually going to run in, which is like your threshold. You can either push it or you can pull it. And when you're much more of a pusher than I am a puller.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. Let's talk about this one workout that James Kelly has described. He describes it as his favorite workout and the way that he knows whether he's ready for the race. And it's a run and burpee workout. It's 6 by 400 meters and 25 burpee to plate. Why do you program that workout for James Kelly? And why do you think that's such a good indicator of race fitness for him?
So that workout specifically was just, again, it was one of the GPP workouts that I was like, look, it doesn't have to be all out. This is just it's a workout. Go easy, right? That one specifically, though, he's done a lot because he'll ask for it, or like I think it's appropriate to put in. But what happened with that is I had done it and I was like, oh, I did pretty good. I was like 18 something, high 18 minutes. And him and I, like just being friendly, I was like, here's what I did. And he's like, oh, I'm going to beat that. I'm like, you don't have to though. But I put it on a day that he was allowed to like add some intensity in. He's gotten it down to like low 16s while running on an assault runner with it. That is so impressive to be on an assault runner and then run 400 meters, 25 burpee to plate, and do that 6 times. You're talking he's finishing a round in like 2:45, like 2 minutes and 45 seconds average per round. He's just flying.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And for those listening, that is a workout that's relatively easy to do. So I'd encourage everyone to give that a go and see what time you can come up with.
You can do it anywhere. And like to do it on an assault runner, like he's not a big guy. Running on an assault runner is usually a little bit easier if you're the bigger you are. But imagine that if you're running a 6-minute mile pace, and I was just trying to do the math in my head, he was low 16, so it was like a 240 per. It was like 242 or something, 241 per round pace. If you run a 6-minute per mile pace for that workout, it would be a minute 30 for the 400, and then you have to do 25 burpees in a minute 10 every single round, and then you got to repeat that over and over. Like that's one of that's extremely hard. Go try to do one round that.
It's just the speed of the burpees. It's unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch topics a little bit. So, nutrition for Hyrox racing. We've seen what can be described as a nutrition revolution in endurance sports. People are just continuing to push up the number of grams of carbohydrates ingested per hour. How has nutrition impacted Hyrox racing? Are you seeing some of this come over to Hyrox as well? Or how do you think about fueling for a Hyrox race?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting actually. Like I came from a wrestling background. It was, we would cut down weight, get to weight, weigh ourselves, and then just go like eat before you'd wrestle. And then if you had to weigh in the second day, you'd have to cut weight again. So I can't believe how high these carbs are getting, but to me it's made a lot of sense just because if you train while in like a surplus of carbs, or not even a surplus, but like you're fueling yourself, then you're getting more out of your training. You're getting more return because you're doing it at a higher effort level, right? So you're able to keep training longer, you recover better, so you're able to train more. Like and that's like the name of the game, right? Is I just want to be, the more you can do and without getting hurt, the more you can do in a shorter amount of time, the better you can become. And these nutrition, and I'm not a nutritionist or a dietitian or anything, but I find it really interesting that like, everybody around, especially like people that are sponsored by the feed now, they get these carbs. You're having gels that are 40 grams of carbs when you have them. You're timing them when you should have them during the race. They seem to be helping, and not just helping during the race, but in training. So you get more return from your training. And for these athletes that are looking for that 1 or 2%, right? If they improve their training, then they're getting 1 or 2% more return.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting to see this starting to impact race performance as well.
Yeah. And I mean, you see it, right? Like in the ultra world, you see it all over the endurance world, the triathletes, the cyclists, like, and that's where a lot of the studies start, right? Is like with cyclists because they have a machine that you can use and it shows power. So it's easy to measure.
Love it. Love it. Okay. Final question, Anthony. So, what areas are you currently exploring or testing in terms of Hyrox training? I know that you're a continuous learner. You're always picking up a new book. You're always learning about new methodologies. Where do you see the frontier of Hyrox training, and how are you personally evolving your approach at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like I recently went back and looked at like what I'd programmed even a year ago to now, and I see like some of the influence that I read through about how you don't have to do big Vo2 Max things. You don't have to do lots of like 5-minute hard mile intervals and stuff. Like go out and you can do your threshold stuff, the same kind of like structure we did. But if you just run these strides, so for example, I program strides at least 3 times a week, but these strides will be 20 seconds to 30 seconds long, and you do like 5 or 6 of them. In total, at the end of a week, when you add them up, you're getting anywhere from like 7 to 9 minutes of hard effort, right? And it's really costing you nothing because it's just 5 or 6 reps at the end of a workout or at the end of a run, and they're just 20 seconds long. So they aren't costing you anything. But if I were to program you something that's like 16 by 200 meters with a minute rest in between, as hard as you can go, right? That workout itself, if you did that, you'd be kind of dead afterwards. There's 16 to 20 reps of 200-meter hard runs. The next day you'd be sore, you'd be tired, your energy level would be low. And you go back and look at it and it's still only like 7 to 10 minutes of work, but you did it all in once instead of spread out. So I noticed that difference between what I had previously been doing to now. So having like speed sprinkles instead of specific speed workouts. And in terms of like the direction of where things are going, yeah, just exploring how we can evolve threshold, like what can we push into, and what strength areas are the most beneficial for improving the stations, because you want people to maximize their stations. But if you look at the doubles race right now, right? Is that realistically possible? Could one person match in the future? Can one person in the future match what people in the doubles are doing right now? Like, is there somebody that is such an amazing solo athlete that they're equal to like what JK and Jake Dearden can do in a doubles race, right? Is there going to be somebody like that in the future? Like, I mean, we couldn't have even imagined several years ago, was it Christian Blumenfeld breaking 7 hours on the Ironman, right? So maybe there is.
It's going to be very exciting to watch. It's going to be very exciting to watch.
You can look at the doubles race to try to figure out what people could do. And so in terms of training methodology, you'll start to soon be able to look at Hyrox to inform Hyrox instead of everything around it.
So good. So good. Well, Anthony, you've been an inspiration in terms of Hyrox coaching. I think the Hyrox coaching podcast that you and JK do, it's my absolute favorite. I love how you've brought together so many different fields, from CrossFit to endurance to wrestling. And I love how you take this very rigorous, data-driven approach as well. So thank you so much for being a part of the podcast. Where can people find you and learn more about you?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Obviously, like you just mentioned, the hybrid coaching podcast that JK and I do. Try to get an episode out every Friday with that. It's available on just about any podcast streaming and YouTube that you could find, or you can find me and my wife at the Hybrid Engine on Instagram, or our training platform, the Hybrid Engine. Bernice Kelly and I, JK's sister, actually just started a weekly live show on YouTube as well. It's called Beyond the Grid. And so that one will just review really any hybrid fitness topics, but it's more of a like sports shows type thing. It's not the like in-depth coaching, but it's fun to do.
Thanks again for watching today, guys. We have some more great Hyrox content coming up. James Kelly is going to be joining the show. We're going to have other Hyrox athletes and coaches coming on as well. So make sure to hit that subscribe so that you see the next video.